morning. It's time for a little kombucha brewing in the house. Okay, so by popular demand, I have returned from the land of culture, fermentation, creation. Let's get jiggy in the kitchen. Let's create some alchemy. You know, alchemy is the transforming the magic into gold, right? So, I've been doing this a little while. You know, it's 2017 now. I've been doing this over 6 years, 6.5 years now. So, it's kind of a funny thing because when I first started looking into how do you do kombucha, how do you brew kombucha, I got kind of hooked. Thought, oh my gosh, I don't like soda. But this sweet and fizzy and flavorful sensation that I encountered told me, you need to get in on this. And it seemed like I could make it at home, right? All my research kind of made it sound like it was like laboratory, white glove, clean room. For those of you who know what a clean room is, it means that they have a special vacuum set up. They pull out any dust particles so that you have to be like meticulous, white glove, right? My dad used to work at IBM, so they had the same kind of scenario where they would put on these clean suits where that way everything was disinfected, right? And of course my obsessive compulsive nature was in there too, so the whole idea that everything had to be clean and cleanly, right? Here I am thinking, oh my God, am I going to be able to do this? Especially at the time when I first started doing this, I was living with my dad, and I love my dad, but he's not the cleanest. And I myself am a little bit obsessive compulsive about cleaning. It's only because I've seen what happens when things get dirty, and I've seen the bugs. I don't want bugs in my food, and I don't want bugs around me, whatever kind of bugs they may be. And especially my dad seems to sometimes have roach problems. I, by the grace of God, have not had that issue. But then I also don't give them something to clean up after. So here I was thinking I was going to be like, oh my God, and have a dog and a cat in the house and the fur and, there's all these different things that you start to kind of go, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to do this? Well, I saw enough, I read enough, I learned enough to realize it's not as bad as it sounds. It's actually much simpler. There are a few tips and guidelines to go by that can kind of soothe your mind. Being mindful that, number one, you don't want to use metal. Something about the metal kind of reduces the efficacy, and it's like this, the metal, like magnetize, detract, right? There's another reason, and I can't remember off the top of my head all the details, but I use either plastic, glass, or ceramic, right? I have a wooden spoon that is designated for this. I use the wooden spoon to stir it up when I put the sugar in to mix that up, but also to stir it around to see, how fizzy it already is. And so, in all my years that I've been doing this, and my awareness, there's many ways you can make it. A lot of people, the standard brew out there is to use black tea. I have my own special blend. But then again, whatever you pour into what you do is also going to have a different infusion of who you are, where you're at when you're doing it. Because all the energy that you have within you gets transferred to what you prepare or make. Okay? And so when you do something, no matter what it is, you always want to show up with love in your heart anyway, right? Because now we're coming up, and I talked about this a little while ago anyway, but as you come closer within the 5 days of the new moon or full moon, the gut flora, the enzymes, the good bacteria, everything starts to get like, ooh, we're hungry, feed us. So this is the best time to be brewing, fermenting, is within those 5 days leading up, right? Within that window. And I learned this through a lot of my research, because I like to research. Sometimes I get like a sponge and I just want to learn about every single little detail and thing. So I start going deep, right? So like I've kind of become familiar with so many different things. And I also like to change things up, and I also get a little bored with one thing and move on to another. It's why it's difficult for me to read a whole book through, and why I have lots of books and I haven't read all the books. But when I open them up, that's always what I need. So just saying, don't beat yourself up if you're like me. I still do sometimes beat myself up. Oh, I wish I had read all that, but I don't. And you never know. So fermentation is just fascinating to me because it's an alchemy. It's like you take something and you create something else, but it's this benefit from one living aspect of the vegetables and the fruits to another living enzyme, right? And so if any of you have suffered with any type of dis-ease, discomfort in the belly, issues with digestion, kombucha, kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurts, and I make coconut yogurt as well, right? So all of these beautiful cultured fermented foods are extremely beneficial. And there's so many different types. I mean, I could go into the various, but you know what? Sometimes you only got time for one or two, or, you know, if you can delve into all of it, it's fun. I was doing also kefir or kefir, depending on how you pronounce it, because I've heard it pronounced different ways. There's kvass, there's Rejuvilac, there's June tea, there's that sweet potato fermentation. There's a special name for it. I can't remember the name. There's ciders, right? And then you go into the beers and the wines and things like that. I mean, there's so much various stuff out there that you can create, and it's just a matter of just getting in your kitchen and just playing, right? And that's what it's all about. It's experimenting. You know, that's kind of how we stumble upon, you know, what works for us, our own little gifts, our talents. If we can conceive it, we can achieve it. You know, when you think of something, it's possible. Anything that you can conceive of is possible to bring to fruition. And so, you know, it doesn't hurt to try. If it doesn't work out, then you know it didn't work out, and then you just move on to the next thing. It's kind of how my life has been. Oh, that didn't work out. Let's move on. But let me tell you, I did ruminate over much of my didn't work outs, right? So I actually have over here already, I put a bowl in here hoping that it would help to keep the cabbage down. I'm in the process of making this kimchi blend that will continue tomorrow. I have actually already started my tea because I do cold brew. See, this is another thing that will make a huge difference if you do kombucha, is whether you do a cold brew or you do a warm brew. And I like cold brew because when you brew it with hot water, it actually creates a bitterness to the flavor. So, you know, again, everybody's tea is going to turn out differently. I just know what works for me because of all of my experimentations. Just saying. So, okay, I'll tell you what's in this one. It's not what I always use, but I mix yerba mate. There's some gunpowder green tea and some young hyacinth tea. I also change it up from time to time. My favorite is white tea, but I'm going to tell you right now, the white tea is more expensive to brew. It is expensive to buy in bulk and even still. So, I have a smaller booch in the back corner over here that will be brewed in the next couple days as well, and has plenty of extra scobies. I'm gonna have to clean the scobies out of that. Oh, and I have I almost forgot, but I didn't really because I was thinking about this tonight. I have a coffee kombucha going on over in this corner. So this one, that one's just as special as the white tea, baby. And it smells so good. And I can't tell you how good it tastes either. It smells so good. And I actually have a little bit of a new blend on this one, and I really am starting to like the way the first blend came out, where I use coconut water and one of the chameleon tea blends, so that you know what, I made it simple on myself. I just went out and bought the bottle and came back and stuck it in there, and it really turns out nice and tasty. And I really like their pecan. And it's that time of year, right? So we're going to actually do a little bit of this kombucha, and I'm going to tell you, this can take me 3 hours to play with because I just spend so much time infusing it with my love and really going through the process of bottling this. Sometimes I'm flavoring it at the same time, which I'll flavor some of this. I made up some applesauce the other day, and so what I'll probably do is use some of the applesauce in the kombucha, right? I'm telling you, Barbara, there's not a lot of people who even know about how you can do it with coffee, so please do, and let me know what happens when you create it, because that's something special, and it does take a little bit of fine-tuning. When I've made it in the past, when I did it the first time, I was living in Naples, Italy, and I was making it with the mocha machine, and I'll show the mocha brewer. Actually, I know what that is. That's over here. So the Italian mocha. Oh wow, I guess I moved stuff around on myself. Oh, there it is. So I have a lot of these. I have a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff is still in Europe for some reason. I have a big version of this, and I also had the fancy La Pavone, where it was all wood and really fancy. Yeah, I've had a lot of stuff over the years, and just kind of ended up that I think got stolen in the moves. So basically, if you've never used one of these, this is an espresso machine. It's what the Italians call a mocha press, or mocha. It's a mocha espresso. In fact, is what is written on it. And this is a Bialetti, okay? I'll even show you how this works if you've never used one of these. Basically, this is the top, this is the bottom. This is the filter, and the ring is missing. Okay, well this wouldn't be very effective. There's supposed to be a gasket in that, but there is not. So when, like a rubber gasket seal to seal it on the top. You put the water inside of here. Esatto. La nonna sempre fa così, con la mocha. So you put the water up to this little point here. See, there's this little air valve. You put the water, that's the water point as well. You put the coffee in here. Now there's two ways you can do it. Now the Neapolitans will put a lot of them put the sugar in it already, and then it also comes out even more frothy. Now and then on top of that, what they'll do, and then usually, like I said, there's supposed to be a rubber gasket on the top. Then you put it, and it gets pressed down, and you twist this back on. You put it on your stove top. You'll know it's actually coming up because it'll start to bubble up and come up through the top. And now what they like to do, what my Italian friends would like to do is at first, when it first starts coming up, they pour some in a cup with a bunch of sugar to create the froth, and they whip it up, right? So it gets that froth already. La crema, they call it. La crema. And it's basically the sugar that creates la crema. That's your true espresso, the way Napolitano. Come fanno loro, Napolitani. And so, yes, I made several cups of this, and it took a long process on the side. And it tasted the way I made it, because this is different than what I'm doing over here, which is also very yummy. It tasted like a mocha, meaning I didn't add chocolate, but it had the chocolatey espresso kombucha flavor. Amazing. Yummy. That's all I'm going to say. It was really, really good. Now, the irony of that, some Italians are very set in their ways, and at the time I was living there, my landlord, I offered him to try some, right? And he's an older man. And he's like, this is it. Questo non è what did he say? Questo non è un espresso. E non puoi fare così con gli italiani. Like, don't do this to the Italians. Like, this is, like, they're very particular. Some people are set in their ways, like their flavors. Don't try to mess with what they're used to. It was he's an older man, though, so it was kind of comical to have that little interaction. But I appreciate and love sharing whatever I can with people. So if they enjoy it, they enjoy it. If not, that's okay. I don't take it personal. You can't take anything personal. Because people take things personal, they make them personal. Even when it wasn't intended that way, and vice versa. Even if it was, it doesn't matter. So I have my tools, special tools when I do this. Nothing fancy, peeps. We've got a funnel. And this is all that belongs to the booch. That's all I'm saying. I have this filter. and it fits perfectly on the funnel I have, right? So that because when I pour out the SCOBY, the water, not the kombucha liquid itself, I don't want all the sediment passing through. So a lot of times I end up with a whole bunch of kombucha threading. It's from the SCOBY. It's part of the actual, the SCOBY. It's part of it, it grows legs. It continues to ferment. So I take this and I put it in the bottle that I'm going to put it in, and I start pouring it. Now I have a special little cup. So here's I'm going to stir it with this. And then I have a little cup that this is kind of comical. It's just raw and rad. This is how I roll. I scoop it out like this. And I've got this routine down. I've been doing this long enough that it doesn't bother me that it takes a little bit of time, because it's all in my, again, it's my loving process. It's all about me infusing this batch with all of my love. And so I get a little obsessive with the cleaning of fingers and all that, because I want to make sure that I'm not, I don't use the metal like I said in the beginning. I always use plastic, glass, wooden spoon, or ceramic, right? And sometimes I'm playing mantra in the background, or I'm singing and chanting, especially even in my mind. I don't have to necessarily sing it out loud, but it's like just keeping and setting an intention that this is, this is where I'm putting my energy. I'm infusing my love. It's part of the process, right? So, just to show you, I have several bottles back here already. So these cobalt blue bottles are really helpful. I love anything with a pop top personally, because these and they keep them pretty darn tight, okay? But the key is paying attention when you go to open these after they've been on the counter, creating their fizz, building up, because that's where you get your fizziness, is sitting it on the counter for a few days. It depends on how fizzy it is to begin with, but when you go to actually open the bottle, put it in the fridge and all that, you want to make sure. See, I have a couple ways. The way I do it to open this is not that difficult to open, but a lot of people struggle. So I always put it against my body, hold my palm over. I make sure that I have this side toward me, which is that little round part is away from me. I press with, so I put my fingers over the top. I press with the palm and my right thumb, because it's pretty hard to push by one thumb, okay? You're not trying to break thumbs off. And then I press with both, so I get an even pressure going out. I still have the top on, and then I slowly, and I pay attention, because if I start to hear shh, I'm like, I have to hold it on so that it doesn't go everywhere. Because a lot of times people just want to go psh with both thumbs, and then they're wondering why they've got a champagne explosion. In my yoga studio, where I bring this all the time because I share it with people, I can't count the amount of times that me and a girlfriend who I also started up making kombucha, I gave her my SCOBYs, and I've given a lot away and started people brewing. We have wiped down walls. We have hit the ceiling. We have hit all of the blinds. We basically have cleaned the kitchen at our yoga studio and all over the place as a result of several explosive bottles. And we're talking flavored bottles, watermelon kombucha, because I've made all different types of flavors. Strawberry, and it's messy. It's sticky. So SCOBY stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. Don't let it scare you. It's not scary, right? Tell me what your favorite flavors are. What's your favorite flavor? What's your flavor? Tell me what's your flavor. Because I can't say that I have a lot of favorites. And I made one just recently that tasted like Kool-Aid. That was the bomb diggity. And truly, it was just me using my plum applesauce, some citrus extract, some orange extract, and a little vanilla stevia, and it was so yummy. Ginger's yeah, definitely ginger. Ginger's awesome. Oh yeah, strawberry ginger's delicious. Done that one too. When I used to be able to do pineapple, I had to make a goji berry pineapple. This the bomb. And also, yes, raspberry ginger is a really good one. Blueberry, or actually, what was it called? So, I recreated the mojito one that GT Dave came out with. I remember what I was able to make with that one. I took blueberry and ginger. I think it was blueberry, ginger, and lime. Very, very good. Very simple, very refreshing. My dad loves that one. Oh, I keep going for the towel. He needs a towel. You've never tried it. Okay, so kombucha. So real quick too, because if you're an alcoholic and anybody who's in the fermenting world, it's a fine line for people who are recovering alcoholics, because depending on you knowing your nature and knowing how how addicted you are, it's very important to understand there's a small byproduct of alcohol in any type of fermentation, because that's the nature. That's how fermentation is it creates this byproduct of alcohol, of whey, and a lot of people don't realize it. And so I've encountered people who don't have a problem. They don't feel like it. It doesn't faze them, but they like the kombucha and they don't drink it in excess. And then I have other friends who swear they can't touch it, not even a drop. And you know what? I appreciate and respect that in each and every individual, because you need to know you. And so if you are somebody who knows yourself, you know whether or not it would be too much and whether or not you should even try it. Or if you just say, listen, I can't, and that's okay. And it's really important to honor people where they're at, right? So without further ado, let me introduce you to my SCOBY. Ooh, passion fruit and mint. Watermelon mint I've made. Also, I've made both honeydew with vanilla, but really the cantaloupe vanilla is like a melonsicle, like a creamsicle. Oh, it's really good. And I made that one for the first time about 2 years ago. I struggled with myself because I have this like whole palate that goes, I really want to make a kombucha with watermelon, but I kept thinking it would be too watery. The moment, and when I finally did make it, I was like, oh my God, why didn't I listen to my palate first, right? Because my palate is just as intuitive, right? So I made it, and I made the watermelon. I was like, it's like a Jolly Rancher, a fizzy Jolly Rancher. It's so delicious. And then I make another one using mint, and it's delicious. And I've done both with the mint leaves and a very fine drop of the oil. You got to be very careful with oil, because oil, it's very potent and it can be too overwhelming. And so, you want to meet the SCOBY? So I cleaned this out just recently. So what is in here is the newest with a couple old ones. The newest one is very thin. Well, it's thinner. It's shorter. So ultimately, the newest brew always gives you this nice clean cellulose. It's basically a cellulose. And see? But the strands is what I try to keep out of it, out of my bottles when I'm brewing them. Okay. And as much as I try, I still make little messes on my countertop. Sweet surrender. And so we're going to start out. I actually have to turn it a little bit, because the way I turn it out, I prefer it to come toward me, not away to the right. And so I need to stir it first. This is what I like to do first. The first key for me to stir it is to push the SCOBY down out of the way so I can scoop into it better. But I also like to stir it up just to see if this tells me how fizzy it already is, okay? that I could go a couple days longer. Like my batches are very forgiving if I go a little bit longer, because sometimes I get a little busy and I can't get to them as much as I really want to. Please let me know if anyone else out there also brews kombucha. I'd love to know what your experiences are. You know, when I first started this, there was this whole talk about continuous brew and not to continuous brew, and it confused the heck out of me, because I'm like going, well, wait a minute here. You can't technically keep on, it's continuous, but you're still having to wait a couple weeks once you put sugar and more tea in, because then it's not going to be as strong as it was, you know? So what my understanding of continuous brew is, you just keep using a certain amount of the liquid and those same scobies, and you do clean them out after a while. But it's not like you can just swap one out for the other, because again, it takes time to come back to where it was when you took some out. So how long have you been brewing? And do you have any funny stories? Because I have a few. Like be very attentive and wary of the what do you call them? The did I already do it? Yep, I did. Whoops. Fruit flies. So fruit flies love kombucha. It's really easy, Rebecca. I'm telling you, it's super easy. It's easier than it sounds. I'm basically starting this now. I have the tea brewing behind me. I do a cold brew. It's super easy. All you need, really, is a starter. Now, you can get a SCOBY. You can use a previous tea, like a previous kombucha. Oh, I've never had an explosion. I've never had an explosive bottle. I've had explosions, but not the same as like, not, my bottles never like popped on me. I've heard of stories where people's kombucha, oops, yep, and then that happens. I didn't pay attention, because when it's in the cobalt bottle, you got to pay attention to when it's going to come out the top. So, this is a 2-gallon bottle jar, and basically I got it at Walmart, because those bottles are pretty, the jars are pretty cheap, and it comes with a lid, which is another key. So there's one bottle already bottled, right? There's the top. I always rinse my bottles, just because if there's any sticky, there's another thing that attracts the bugs. And if it's going to sit on my countertop, the last thing I need is bugs. So yeah. Oh yeah, bought explosion all over the place. While you were opening it, that is hilarious. And you know what? It becomes kind of like a storyline. My girlfriend Terry and I just laugh about it, like, how's your booch going? You know, like, have you had any more major cleanups? She brews hers and then puts hers on the counter for like 7 days, and I'm like, girlfriend, my stuff is usually pretty full of energy. So explosion, I wouldn't put my stuff on the countertop that long. It was even worse when I lived in Italy. I tell you that I would make certain batches, and at 24 to 48 hours maximum, and my brew would be perfect, just right, just right. You know, like just the right amount of fizz, not too fizzy, not too light. Now, the other thing is how long does it take for the kombucha to brew? After you add the sugar and after you add the tea, and I put the cover on it, and I have a special space for it, and I have crystals and stuff around it. My kombucha lasts, it can take anywhere, the longest I've let it go, because I was in Europe for 3 weeks. Actually, I was in Europe for a month and a half, and I had to start all over, but I had started it so that it was really, really fine. You don't put it in the fridge unless you've bottled it and it's sat on the counter for the fizz, and then I put it in the fridge. I don't put this in the fridge. This goes on its own little stand and with that towel over it. Even though it has a glass top, I put a towel over it because I've also dealt with fruit flies. So going back to the fruit fly story, when I lived in Italy, I had a continuous brew, and I was using one of those water, the type that you put these big 5-gallon jugs in upside down and you have the little spigot. I was doing a continuous brew with that. The bad part is I had cheesecloth across the top. Just to let you know, cheesecloth, if you know anything about fruit flies, those little buggers, really, no, they can go in between the weaves. You don't want to put cheesecloth. You want something with a really strong, like something that it will not be lightly woven, but a tight weave. And so I put an actual thick towel around it on the top just because of that. Because my first experience with fruit flies was one where I freaked out. I poured all of that kombucha down my tub, down the drain, and I threw that kombucha SCOBY out and I started all over again. Now here's where I go in hindsight, and some of you might think this is gross. I've kind of gotten over this part because I learned this. They're only going into the actual cellulose of the SCOBY. And if you're using a filter like this, technically I bet you the kombucha was perfectly fine. It's not like you would have ended up with any issues. But truly, it did freak me out, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody, and I wouldn't do it again anyway. So yeah, some people might be funny about that. I have not experienced it again since then because I learned my lesson and I keep it clean. But yeah, looking back, it just was like, yeah, freak you out. I don't ever wish that on anybody having to experience it. So it was like and I had a really good brew going on then, so I had to start all over again. You don't want to seal it up tight unless you want an exposed, because it's going to create, you need to have some oxygen getting into it because it still needs oxygen. In fact, when you watch it, you want to make sure the SCOBY doesn't create an air pocket in between itself and the actual liquid. You want to make sure it's still touching and immersed in the liquid, in the juices, okay? And so I have these big bottles that I basically came from apple cider vinegar, and I reuse these because, again, I like to use glass. I don't like to use plastic. And I'll just fill these up just like this, just plain without any flavoring. And my dad, he always comes by for bottles because I'm my dad's booch supplier. And I taught him my favorite way to have kombucha. Fresh squeezed orange juice, because now we're coming into citrus season here in the Sunshine State. Fresh squeezed orange juice with ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg, maybe a little vanilla, and some booch. I love, love, love that flavor. And sometimes I'll bottle it up like that, but I prefer it when it's fresh, half and half. And it's just, especially for me, it's a refreshing flavor. When it's warm, it's kind of almost like having a little cocktail. But not trying to get drunk, that's for sure, because I don't drink. So, I'm going to fill this bottle up. And so my kombucha, I try to go every 2 weeks. It's like 10 days every 2 weeks, depending on the weather. I live in a warmer climate, and as long as you have a warmer climate, it's going to brew quicker. Now, if you are in a colder climate and it is sitting in a colder environment, it's very likely it will take a little longer. And so that little bit longer could be 3 weeks, or it would be 2 weeks. It just depends. Everybody's batch is going to come out differently anyway. And you have to treat it like your baby and just really nurture it and love it. I love sharing my kombucha because I know that a lot of people really do appreciate and love it. So, wow, it's too sour. Well, and the other thing is it also depends on your sugar to your sugar ratio. So I put about a cup, this is a 2-gallon glass jar. I use anything from 2.5 to 3 cups. No, I actually do 2.5 cups. So yeah, that's my typical for 2 gallons of liquid. I can't read the rest of that. Have I ever heard about oxygenating? I'm gonna have to read. Ooh, hello. See, I have to pay attention. I can easily just start pouring and stop, not remember that there's a limit to the amount that I can put in there, and that would be it. As I get distracted over here. Let me see what you were saying, David. Oxygenating your kombucha. I've never heard of that before. I've never heard of that before. That is rad. How do you do that? You'll have to tell me more about that. I'm curious. I would be careful about oxygenating the kombucha because, unless you're talking about like 3 years, oh my gosh. Oh, Sarah, I'd be afraid to even open up that cabinet. You don't have any bugs or anything? I think I know what you're saying now that I think about it, David. Are you referring to like on tap? Because you got to be careful, because if you give it any alcohol or if you give it too much oxygen or too much fizz, it will become explosive. The other thing also is like if you tap this stuff, you know, there's a lot of kombucha on tap. It's completely different. Oh, I bet it's a little earthy, Sarah. I would put that in your compost pile. I think it's beyond the vinegar state. I don't know what goes on beyond vinegar. But David, you've got me curious if I'm misunderstanding you. Please clarify. I think all of us are very curious, and I want to know what it is to be more specific. Give me some deets on that oxygenating, if you've tried it especially. Because going back to, there's a lot of kombucha on tap out there, but I prefer it from the bottle. Because when you put it on tap, in order to push it through, you need that extra oxygen and it waters it down. So to me, I don't really care for it. That's just my preference. Unless you have a strong one, maybe if it does that, it works okay. I don't know, but I've yet to say that I really enjoyed an on-tap kombucha. Most of the time, it's just completely different than the same brewer has made that's in the bottle, and I prefer bottled. Maybe because it's not doctored or, you know, like it's still in its natural state a little bit more there. And so I was going to make some flavors up too. I made up a bunch of applesauce the other night with kombucha, and I'm going to do up some more. I have 2 types of applesauce in here that I made the other night. One is a vanilla applesauce, and it's more like a creamsicle. I've done lavender too. Yeah, lavender you could do with some vanilla. That would be lovely. Or you could even mix, I've done rose petals. Ooh, I haven't done rose petals in a while. You know what? I've got rose petals up in here too. Rose petals is one of my favorite, and it's interesting how the rose petals come out. They have a similar flavor to like like the pink grapefruit or red grapefruit or whatever. Well, that's my hibiscus. Where's my other jar? Oh, I know it's in here. Bear with me, darling. Bear with me. I knew you're here. Oh, y'all get to see how I find my stuff in my home. Everything's all over the place, and I always move stuff on myself. So I think, and I'm hoping it's this one right here. Whoops. I'm waiting to see what David says. With an air stone, pure oxygen because the SCOBY is aerobic. I'm going to have to look into that. I'm very curious. Okay. I don't know if you could see all of that. That was the green matcha tea falling down on me. I've got, I think, there's my rose petals, baby. Yeah. Yeah. Just getting silly tonight. Okay, so we're going to put this up just because. So, I love the smell of rose petals. Thank you. Have a lovely evening, Susan. You know, rose petals. And these are edible. You know, it's interesting because there's a lot of edible stuff we never stop to think about. I love to use these, and I've also made various forms of cakes and use them in cakes. Not only are they beautiful, but they taste good too. So I now am going to play with that because I haven't done it in a while. I'm going to make up 2 bottles, maybe 3, of the rose petals. I'll do 3. Just because y'all are here with me, and then maybe I'll move on from there and make up some of the applesauce. I might even play with a mix of them because I do that. I'll mix everything. I would use, you know what, I would do the lavender however you feel. You can do essential oil, but I personally would not unless it's food grade. I would stick with the leaves. I would go straight flower. You know, get food grade. Everything that you want to use in your kombucha, make sure it's food grade. And essential oils, unless they're food grade, you got to be careful. A lot of people don't know that there's a lot of misconception that because it's an essential oil that you can ingest it. Ooh, yes. See, that's what I'm talking about, Erin. Orange, pomegranate, and ginger. Now, orange and pomegranate there. I've got pomegranate in there too, and I've got orange extract. So I'm going to do that one next. Thank you for that hint because I haven't done... That might be where... Oh, you know what? That's probably how I came up with the Kool-Aid version. And so, you know what? It doesn't look like much. Ooh, that's probably more than I needed to put in there. I just put a light coating on the bottom of these bottles. I really don't measure things. I'm really bad like that. So now, I'm doing, like I said, I'm going to do 3 bottles of the rose petals. And it's just so pretty. The colors that come out of this are so divine. You can't deny nature has an amazing presence in all that we do. We just don't give it enough credit. But we are nurturing with nature as much as possible. And the more we do, the more we actually tune into our own innate knowing in nature. Nature can teach us so much about ourselves, right? I can usually tell after if I need to add more or not. And I might even... I've been playing a lot with vanilla lately. I absolutely love vanilla. So vanilla goes in a lot of my stuff. And the vanilla stevia that I use to flavor with vanilla has alcohol in it. So I will tell you right now, I already know from the experience of using that does increase the fermentation because that little boost of the vanilla alcohol extract, it definitely enhances it a little bit. I don't measure really. I know, right? It's so funny. Well, what is your recipe? I'm like, eyeball. All the ingredients are eyeballing it, right? Oh, ginger bug too. That's another thing. My sister played with that, and I have wanted to play with the ginger bug. See, that's another thing. I like to try everything. I have not done it. I keep on meaning to do it, and I've talked to my sister, and we're like, oh yeah, da da da. And then like a couple years go by, and I'm like, oh yeah, we need to do that. You know, that's me and my sister laugh about not writing things down, wanting to try everything and do everything. Hydrating while you're booching. Especially when you drink kombucha, you want to drink extra water because you have to balance out. There's still caffeine, even if people don't want to recognize there's caffeine as a byproduct still. Hydrate. Oh, wow. Yeah, cayenne pepper. You know what? I have done kind of like the Bloody Mary version of kombucha as well, which is flavorful. Yes, been missing you too, honey. And Sue, it's been a while since I've done that, but you know, that's what the fun part is trying something new every chance you get. You know, changing things up, keeping yourself youthful, and you've got to use the brain. You've got to change things up. If you don't, the brain, you know, goes basically into atrophy. You know, it's like it's a muscle. Any muscle that you don't keep utilizing atrophies. You have to also challenge it in many different ways. So one of the good things about this when you're making it also is to remember, and I also do chocolate kombucha, one of my favorite things. I haven't done, I keep thinking I need to make chocolates, which I'm going to have to do because when I get ready to do my winter solstice trip, I need to have my chocolates with me. So like, I like the petals to be wet before I'm completely finished, because when they get wet and they're a little bit more soaked of the moisture, it's also gonna take less space up from the top. Even though it looks like it's full, it'll drop down because of the moisture in the petals accumulate. So at one point I was actually going to bottle and sell, and a lot of my friends really, really wanted to buy it. And I have done a little, sales, but not much. Mostly because it takes a lot of time. It is time consuming, but when they started regulating the kombucha industry as if it was also potentially to fall under you have to be very careful. When the government gets into regulating things, people think, oh, the government needs to regulate this and they need to regulate that. No, they don't regulate. They just collect taxes. It's another way of gaining revenue, and it's not even remotely close to the amount of alcohol there is in beer or wine, or even wine coolers. And it's hard to also, if you're a distributor, a lot of people don't know this, but because it is living and it's constantly fermenting, it's still going through that process, it's hard to guarantee that it's not going to keep on changing in the alcohol content as a result. So it may be brewed, and then all of a sudden it gets to a destination and you can't control if they put it in the refrigerator or if it sits out on the tarmac and gets warm. That's going to speed up the fermentation. It's going to change the alcohol content because it's constantly turning over and fermenting. And so that's really hard to be liable for when it's out of your hands after it leaves your distribution or your center, wherever you make it. And so that's a toughie right there. And I had a problem with that when I first was reading about it. And it all came back when I first started, and they took GT Dave off of the market because of this. Somebody in Whole Foods out in California complained that, they were upset. Number one, they were an alcoholic and they were mad that there was alcohol in it, and that set off an alarm because, then they probably were going through their own little guilt process of, I was sober and now I'm not, and I get it. But unfortunately, it created that ripple effect out. And it doesn't prove anything other than, oh shoot, except for that I wasn't paying attention again. There I go. I've just made my first official mess again. I have booch all over the place over here. I will show you my mess. Look at that. It's all over my glasses, all over the place. I'll have to check out your link, David. Thank you. I will look into that further. And here's another thing to pay attention to when you're doing this is while you are doing this, it is messy. And the actual, especially if you have, if any of you have countertops you don't want to stain, you have to be extremely attentive because this stuff has tea in it, and tea stains. And this stains even more after it's fermented the tea. And so here I am with crappy countertops. You couldn't tell if they were stained, but my sinks are white. And if there's anything that has a ring around it with the tea or the kombucha, I have to pull out the heavy duty abrasive stuff to clean out the sink because it ends up staining my sink. So right now the bottom of my sink is slightly yellow as a result of some of it, because when I pour it out or however it ends up in my sink, it ends up turning everything yellow, right? It just basically stains, you know. But it's a different type of stain than a tea. And when I get it on towels and clothes, which I did a couple weeks ago, it does not come out unless you're really good at pre-treating. You have to be very attentive to that. So again, see how look how pretty that is. Rose petals, people, roses. My life is sweet like roses. How about yours? I appreciate it. And so what I will do though, instead of letting it sit like this, I want it to disperse throughout the whole thing, because I just think it's so pretty to watch the flowers. Look at that. Rose petals. I actually will turn these, I'll just lay them on the counter like this, just to let it infuse better, and so that it's not up to the cap itself. Because then it just seems messy. And then it ends up with an air pocket and no guarantee that it's going to get under the water line, let's say. Oop. Sometimes. So we have all this pretty, and it's just so artistic, right? It's like the rose petals are doing a dance. I know, right? I know I'm giving all sorts of ideas to all of y'all who've already been doing this. If you've never used rose petals, trust me, it's my interpretation of the flavor reminds me of grapefruit. It's a soft, it's slightly, of course it's sweet, but it's that flavor is just unique. But the closest I could come to is more like grapefruit. Yeah. And so just to give you, the idea, I just wanted to share a couple different recipes for flavoring the booch if you've never tried these. And of course I just gave you one. You have to really just play with the flavors and listen to your own palate, because that's how it ends up being. And then what I do, and I was already saying how, I'm going to have to take that bowl out. I got all sorts of stuff going on back here, if you couldn't tell. I brew it cold, and I'll see how dark that is. It's not, I don't do black tea. Black tea to me is bad it doesn't agree with my stomach. But what I'll do is I'll put 2.5 cups of sugar in there, and then I'll pour this and more tea, because I'll keep brewing the tea until it's done. And I'll keep doing cold brew. And that's during the process, right? And so the longest part of my processing is usually waiting for the tea to be brewed, right? And so, let me see. I'll do one more flavor, and then we can say goodnight. I had everything coming out of my cabinet over here at me. So yeah, the rose petals is fun. I may even add a little vanilla. So yeah, you have to try something different to know what works. And not everybody's going to find the right combination right away. And just play with it and have fun. If you ever doubt yourself before even trying, that's probably the worst thing you can do. That's one thing I learned for myself. If it sounds like, if I think it might taste good, I just try it. Because I know when I first started this, like I said, I wanted to do watermelon, and the watermelon ended up being one of my best flavors, still is. Everybody who loves it, they know. They're like, oh my God, do you have any watermelon? Do you have the watermelon with the mint? Or even, I've done it with vanilla as well. And I've got 3 more bottles back here. Typically, I get about 12 to 13 bottles out of a 2-gallon jug. It can be more. It just depends on how full to the top and how many scobies are in there. The scobies themselves take up a lot of space. And so this is the part where it'll be a little messy. I'll show you one quick one. So this one I think is just applesauce. Bonjour. Comment vous? Non. Comment ça va? I know there's no watermelon here right now. There's little watermelons. It's hard to come by the watermelons, and I live in Florida, and usually we still have watermelons this time of year. So I would put a tablespoon of applesauce in here. You can use any bottles. Let me tell you, I reuse bottles all the time. This is an apple cider vinegar bottle. You know, I use these all the time because why buy new bottles if you already have access to the old that you've gotten from somewhere else? And I have a lot of those. I also have some of the GT Dave bottles. People give me bottles. But the Pop Top bottles are my special bottles. I actually prefer to give people the other bottles just because I figure the cleaning of the other bottles is easier, as well as I probably will get the other bottles back. The other ones are hard to get back. So, but yeah, just to let you know, I would do a tablespoon and a half or so of applesauce, and then add a little bit. Oh, and then I'd add some more vanilla. And you can play up, and you can do extracts and flavors. You can do all sorts of good, neat tricks. But I just wanted to give you a little taste teaser of my kombucha in my laboratory, in my kitchen. You know that I love to prepare something different every time. In the background I have a kimchi started, and also some radishes with some parsnips, and some ginger, and some lemon. Can't wait to see how those turn out. Y'all have a wonderful evening. I hope you enjoyed this segment. Keep it raw, stay rad. I love you. What?